I once tried to help someone I cared about, thinking I was doing the right thing. Instead, that one choice flipped my whole life upside down. The harder I tried to fix their problems, the deeper I sank. Have you ever ruined your own life just by trying to save someone else? You know that gut-wrenching feeling when you're watching someone you care about drowning right in front of you, and you're holding the only life preserver, but a ridiculous rule means you can't throw it? That's exactly where I found myself, and the choice I made that day ended up tearing my entire world apart. All because of a moment of pure, desperate humanity. My school had this ironclad, zero-tolerance policy about sharing medication. No exceptions. Ever. I mean, they'd expelled a senior last year for sharing ADHD meds before the SATs. He lost his college acceptance, and his girlfriend ended up with a criminal record. Meanwhile, I took Xanax for my anxiety, and my friend Elise's anxiety was just as bad, if not worse. But her parents? They thought anxiety was a weakness and pills were for addicts. They literally scoffed when she tried to talk about it, saying their generation was too busy working to have anxiety. Can you believe that? I watched her slowly, painfully drowning. She started missing more school, calling in sick on test days, her grades plummeting from honor roll to barely passing. Her parents just called her lazy and threatened military school if things didn't improve. She was trapped and I was too. I had a bottle of my life preservers in my backpack, knowing one pill could help her, knowing I'd seen other kids with panic disorder completely turn around with the right medication. But Elise's parents would rather see her fail than admit mental illness was real, and the school's policy meant I couldn't help her without risking both our futures. The rule didn't care that she was suffering. It just saw distribution. It was maddening. Then came finals week. Elisa had this history presentation worth 30% of her grade. She'd prepared for weeks, memorized everything. But when she stood up to present, I could see it happening. Her body just froze. Her voice cracked on the first sentence, her hands shaking so violently she dropped her note cards. The whole class was staring, which of course made it worse. Someone actually laughed when her voice squeaked, and I swear I wanted to punch them. She bolted. I followed her, finding her in the bathroom, having a full-blown panic attack. She couldn't breathe, couldn't stop crying, kept gasping that she was dying. Her fingernails were turning blue from lack of oxygen. Blue. She was scratching at her throat like she was trying to tear it open for air. I tried to get her to breathe with me, but she was too far gone. She grabbed my arms, her eyes wide with terror, and choked out a single word, "Please." We both knew what she meant. Without thinking, I pulled out one of my Xanax. Just one. She stared at it in her palm like it might burn her, then slipped it under her tongue like I told her to. 10 minutes later, she was breathing again. The color came back to her face. Her hands stopped shaking. She could form complete sentences. She went back in there, did her presentation, got a B+, and didn't get sent to military school. I thought we were in the clear. Nobody else was in the bathroom. No cameras. We were so careful. But Kevin of all people, had seen us both go in, heard Elisa crying, then saw her emerge calm. His older brother dealt Xanax illegally, so Kevin knew what panic attacks looked like and how fast the medication worked. He mentioned it to his girlfriend, who mentioned it to her mom, who just so happened to be friends with Elisa's mother. The rumor, this insidious, poisonous thing, spread like wildfire through parent Facebook groups before either of us even knew there was a problem. I wanted to find Kevin and scream at him. Scream that he destroyed my life over gossip. But what was the point? His brother dealt actual drugs for profit, and nothing happened to their family. 2 weeks later, the unimaginable happened. My parents got served with a lawsuit. Elisa's parents were suing us for sedating their child without consent, seeking damages for emotional distress, medical bills, and punitive damages. They wanted $300,000. My parents didn't even have $3,000 in savings. We'd lose our house. My college fund was already gone, used for groceries, and now this. I kept replaying the image of my mom, crying at the kitchen table, clutching those lawsuit papers, asking me over and over if I was sure Elisa was dying. As if maybe if she hadn't been actually dying, we could afford this somehow. It was heart-wrenching. Then came the school's turn. Principal Bernard called me to his office. Elisa's parents' lawyer was waiting with a recorder. Bernard pulled up security footage from the hallway. Me and Elisa entering the bathroom, then Elisa leaving visibly calmer. I want to be very clear about what I observed. he intoned into the recorder, his voice chillingly detached. This is documented evidence of what appears to be a substance transaction between students. Our zero-tolerance policy exists precisely to prevent this kind of dangerous distribution of controlled substances. My stomach dropped through the floor. He was really going to do this. He was going to call saving Elisa's life drug dealing. Because it was easier than admitting their rules. Our rules policy was killing kids. He gave me this sympathetic, completely fake look. I'm required to report this to the police as well. You understand that sharing Xanax is a felony, right? I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Couldn't even nod. He clicked off the recorder, slid it into his drawer, then picked up his phone and started dialing. My whole body felt like stone. He was calling the police. For me. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. 5 minutes away. Should I warn them? My fingers wouldn't work. The secretary poked her head in. My parents were here. And right behind them, a uniformed officer walked down the hallway. Mom rushed to me, grabbing my shoulders, frantic. Dad just stared, trying to solve a math problem that made no sense. Officer Martinez introduced himself, pulled out a small card, and started reading me my rights. Mom's hand found mine, squeezing so hard I thought my fingers would break. Dad kept interrupting, asking about a lawyer if we could leave, but Officer Martinez just kept reading in this flat, practiced voice. Bernard handed over his folder screenshots, his statement, admitted to giving another student prescription medication. Mom sobbed when she heard felony. We didn't know any lawyers. Couldn't afford one anyway. The officer said I wasn't arrested yet, but it would be referred to juvenile court. 20 minutes that felt like hours. When we finally left, kids were pressed against classroom windows, watching our walk of shame. That night, the lawsuit papers sat on our kitchen table next to the leftover pasta nobody was eating. $300,000. It might as well have been $3 million. Dad pulled up bank statements, doing frantic math on a napkin, selling his truck, a second mortgage. Mom sat with her head in her hands, saying we didn't even have enough equity to borrow against. Her red eyes found mine again. Was Elisa really dying? I could only nod. Blue fingernails. Couldn't breathe. They argued about money until 3 a.m. Mom was crying in their bedroom around 4 a.m., muffled sobs. I knew she was thinking about my college fund, already gone, and how we'd never recover. The next morning before sunrise, Dad was on his laptop searching legal aid, leaving voicemails because it was Saturday. He finally found Clarissa Barron, a lawyer specializing in juvenile cases. Free consultation that afternoon. 40 minutes drive to her office in a strip mall, between a nail salon and a tax place. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with purple streaks in her hair and a nose ring. Not at all like TV lawyers. She listened to everything without interrupting, taking notes. Then very seriously she told us the first rule. I couldn't talk about this case with anyone except her and my parents. No social media. No texts. No explaining to teachers. Nothing. She said the school's zero-tolerance policy didn't override state law about emergency medical assistance. There might be something called a necessity defense, if we could prove Elisa was in immediate danger. But she needed to research, review the footage. By Friday, the school sent an emergency suspension letter, certified mail. I couldn't return to campus. Expulsion hearing in 3 weeks. Within hours, screenshots of rumors, calling me a drug dealer, were all over Instagram and Snapchat. Kids I'd never spoken to were saying I deserved whatever happened. Someone posted my yearbook photo from last year with pill emojis all around it. By dinner, over 200 brutal comments. This whole thing felt like one of those moments where everyone knows what really happened, but no one wants to say it because the truth doesn't fit the rules. Kevin sees 2 girls go into a bathroom during a crisis, and somehow becomes the world's greatest truth teller. Clarissa called Saturday morning. Juvenile Officer Howard Beasley wanted to interview me, but she'd be there, and my parents had to be present. She spent an hour on speakerphone preparing me, teaching me to answer only what was asked, to stay calm, even if he tried to provoke me. Monday, I had to clean out my locker while classes were in session, to avoid contact with other students. That's when I saw Elisa, walking down the hall with her parents, flanking her like bodyguards. She tried to stop, but her mom grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. But Elisa managed to mouth, "I'm sorry," before her mom turned her around and marched her toward the office. Her dad glared at me like I was some kind of predator. I realized they'd completely cut her off, probably took her phone. Later that week, Clarissa explained the specific charges Elise's parents were claiming: battery for giving her medication without consent, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Our best defense, she said, was proving Elisa was in imminent peril, immediate medical danger. Could we find witnesses? Get her medical records? The problem was, no one else was in the bathroom to see her turning blue, and her parents would never admit she had a panic disorder. Dad, meanwhile, was digging through parent Facebook groups, piecing together the whole rumor trail with screenshots and timestamps. Kevin told his girlfriend Rachel at lunch. Rachel told her mom at book club that night. Her mom immediately texted Elisa's mom, who was in the same yoga class. The entire thing spread through the parent network in less than 48 hours, each retelling making it sound worse until I'd become some kind of drug pusher, forcing pills on innocent kids. Dad wanted to sue Kevin for defamation, but Clarissa said proving damages from gossip was nearly impossible and would just make us look vindictive. The official expulsion hearing notice arrived next week, a thick packet listing all the evidence: hallway security footage, Principal Bernard's statement, the police report. My stomach dropped. They had video showing me and Elisa entering the bathroom, then her coming out calmer. Clear evidence of a drug transaction, they called it, even though you couldn't see or hear anything that actually happened inside. 2 days later, an email from Ethan Baxter at the school paper. He wanted to interview me about zero-tolerance policies. My first instinct was to forward it to Clarissa. She called back in 10 minutes. "Don't give him anything on record that can hurt our case," she said. "But maybe point him toward researching how many other kids have been expelled for similar things." She was collecting data on policy problems across the district and needed someone to make it public. I gave Ethan her suggestion, not mentioning my situation, and he seemed excited about the angle. That same evening, Mom sat us down at the dinner table with a stack of bills and her work schedule. She'd picked up 3 extra night shifts at the hospital every week. My younger brother Jake looked confused when she said his summer robotics camp was canceled. I interrupted, offering to drop out of school to work full-time at the grocery store where I'd been doing weekends. Mom's face went hard. "Absolutely not. We'll figure this out together." Dad pulled up our bank statements, crossing things off our budget: cable, gym memberships, eating out, Jake's guitar lessons. Everything non-essential. Jake started crying, realizing what was happening because of me. The juvenile interview was scheduled for Thursday morning at the courthouse. Clarissa met us in the lobby, explaining Howard Beasley wasn't like Principal Bernard. She'd worked with him before on cases where kids got caught up in bad situations. In the small interview room, Beasley looked more like someone's grandfather than a cop. He asked me to walk through exactly what happened, taking notes. When I described Elisa turning blue and scratching at her throat, he stopped writing and looked up. "Do you think she would have died without the medication?" Clarissa squeezed my hand under the table, her signal to stay calm and answer honestly. "I'm not a doctor," I said, "but she couldn't breathe and her fingernails were blue." He nodded, wrote something down, then mentioned there might be a diversion program if I qualified. Community service, counseling instead of criminal charges. Clarissa's hand relaxed on mine. Friday morning brought another email from Principal Bernard, this time copying the entire school board. He used phrases like maintaining community safety standards and non-negotiable policy enforcement through 3 pages of bureaucratic garbage. He emphasized that exceptions would undermine the entire disciplinary structure. Dad read it over my shoulder, his face getting redder with each paragraph. He slammed his coffee mug down so hard it cracked. He wanted to drive to the school right then, but Mom held him back. Clarissa was already working on our response strategy. She filed formal discovery requests that afternoon for every piece of evidence they had. She wanted the complete hallway footage, not just their edited clip. Nurse records about students with panic attacks. All policy documents from the past 5 years, looking for inconsistencies. Principal Bernard's emails about my case. "Information is ammunition," she told us. "We need every bullet we can find." After school on Monday, I drove to the hardware store where Kevin worked, stocking shelves. I found him in the paint aisle arranging color samples. When he saw me, his whole body tensed like he might run. I kept my voice steady. Why did you spread that rumor? He shrugged. Everyone already knew something happened when you both went to the bathroom. I was just answering questions, not trying to cause problems. I wanted to grab him and shake him, make him understand he destroyed my life over gossip, but Clarissa had warned me about confrontations. I left before I said something I'd regret, but not before telling him his brother dealt actual drugs for profit. Kevin just shrugged again and went back to his color samples. That night, I got a DM on Instagram from an account with no profile picture. The message said they'd been in the bathroom stall when everything happened. They'd heard Elisa gasping and crying, then heard her calm down after I helped her. They knew I'd saved her life but couldn't testify because their parents would kill them for getting involved. They'd already been warned not to talk about it. I screenshot the message and sent it to Clarissa immediately. She said anonymous witnesses were better than nothing, but wouldn't carry much weight in court. The next morning, Elisa's mom posted on the community Facebook page about how I drugged her daughter without permission, claiming I'd taken advantage of a vulnerable child and violated her trust as a parent. Within an hour, the comments section exploded into full warfare. Some parents called me a criminal who should be in jail. Others defended me, saying I'd helped a kid in crisis when adults failed her. One mom wrote she'd rather her kid break rules than watch someone die. Another said rules existed for a reason, and I was just a drug dealer with excuses. Dad screenshotted everything for Clarissa, while Mom cried reading the horrible things people said about our family. Then something unexpected happened. Douglas Eyes from the district office emailed, asking about Elisa's accommodation history. He wanted to know if anyone had ever discussed her anxiety, or tried to get her help through proper channels. It was the first time any school official acknowledged that Elisa's untreated anxiety was the real issue. Clarissa immediately responded with questions about why accommodations weren't provided earlier, pointing out that the school had failed Elisa long before I tried to help her. 2 days later, Clarissa called me into her office and showed me a letter she drafted to Elisa's parents' lawyer. She pointed to the key part where she suggested they get Elisa evaluated by a real doctor. The wording was careful, hinting that our whole defense would depend on proving Elisa was in actual medical danger that day. She explained that if they wanted to claim damages, they'd have to prove Elisa wasn't really sick, which would mean getting her checked out. It was smart because either way, Elisa would finally get the help she needed. The lawyer would have to respond within 10 days, or it would look bad in court. That same afternoon, Howard Beasley met with us at the courthouse to explain the diversion program. He laid out all the requirements on a sheet of paper that looked endless. I'd have to do 200 hours of community service at an approved location, mandatory counseling sessions every week for 6 months, educational courses about drug laws and safety. It felt humiliating, being treated like an actual drug dealer when all I'd done was help my friend breathe. Mom squeezed my hand under the table while Howard explained that missing even one requirement would mean going back to court. The whole thing would take a year to finish. But if I did everything right, I wouldn't have a criminal record. Something about Kevin's paint aisle shrug still bothers me. He's arranging color samples while someone's life falls apart because of his gossip. The way he just dismisses everything with everyone already knew makes me wonder if he even understands what he did to this family. The next morning, I saw Ethan's article posted on the school newspaper website. He didn't use anyone's names, but everyone knew it was about me. He wrote about how zero-tolerance policies were supposed to keep kids safe, but sometimes did the opposite. The article spread fast, and by lunch parents were arguing about it online. That night at the PTA meeting, several parents stood up and questioned whether the rules were too harsh. One mom said her son had diabetes and asked what would happen if another kid helped him with insulin during an emergency. Principal Bernard kept repeating that rules are rules, and exceptions would create chaos. The debate got so heated they had to end the meeting early. I couldn't go to the meeting because I'd started working nights at the grocery store to help pay for everything. The manager put me on the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, stocking shelves and cleaning. I'd work all night, then try to do my online school assignments during my 15-minute breaks. My eyes burned from staying awake so long, and sometimes I'd forget where I was or what I was doing. Everything felt like I was watching someone else's life through foggy glass. Customers would come in at 3 a.m. buying random stuff and I'd scan their items like a robot. One night I fell asleep standing up and knocked over a whole display of soup cans. The crash woke up everyone in the store, and my manager wrote me up for it. I needed the job too bad to quit, so I started drinking energy drinks to stay awake. By the end of my first week, I'd made enough to cover 1 hour of Clarissa's time. 1 hour. Friday afternoon, Clarissa had me come to her office for testimony prep. She set up a fake courtroom with chairs arranged like the real thing. She played the prosecutor, firing questions at me. She taught me to only answer exactly what was asked, never volunteer extra information. We practiced the same questions over and over until I could answer without my voice shaking. She'd ask about the pill and I'd say, Elisa was having a medical emergency. She'd ask if I knew it was illegal and I'd say, I knew she couldn't breathe. We went through every possible question, and she showed me how to turn each one back to the emergency. She made me practice looking at the school board members when I answered, not at my shoes. After 3 hours, my throat was raw from talking, but I could finally get through the whole thing without crying. Meanwhile, Douglas' eyes had been busy setting up an emergency meeting about Elisa. He used her failing grades and the bathroom incident to override her parents' objections. He brought in documentation showing that students with untreated anxiety had higher dropout rates and self-harm risks. Elisa's parents showed up angry, but Douglas calmly explained that the school had a legal obligation to provide accommodations for students with disabilities. He said anxiety disorders qualified under the ADA, and they couldn't ignore it anymore. For the first time, an adult with actual power was calling out what everyone could see. Elisa's mom tried to argue her daughter was just dramatic, but Douglas had printed out Elisa's attendance records and test scores. The numbers didn't lie about how much she was struggling. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived at our house with a return address from Elisa's parents' lawyer. Inside was the official settlement demand for the full $300,000. They wanted it within 30 days, or they'd take us to trial. Mom's hands shook as she read through all the legal language about emotional damages and medical expenses. Clarissa immediately filed for discovery, which meant Elisa's parents would have to hand over all of Elisa's medical records. She explained this would buy us time and might reveal information that helped our case. If Elisa had ever been to a doctor for anxiety before, it would prove her parents knew about her condition. That evening, I got an email from my English teacher using her personal account. She wrote that she wanted to help but couldn't do it publicly because she was afraid of losing her job. She attached a character reference letter, saying I was a good student who always helped others. She asked me not to tell anyone she'd sent it because the principal had warned teachers not to get involved. I forwarded it to Clarissa, who said every bit of support helped, even if it had to stay anonymous. The next week, I heard from the school secretary about a meeting between Howard Beasley and Principal Bernard. Howard had gone to the school to discuss my case and push for the diversion program. Principal Bernard insisted I needed to face the full consequences of my actions to set an example. Howard argued that diversion was still accountability, just without destroying my entire future. The secretary said they were yelling so loud everyone in the main office could hear them. Principal Bernard kept saying the school's reputation was at stake. Howard shot back that the school's reputation would be worse if they ruined a kid's life over helping someone in crisis. Neither of them would back down, and Howard finally left, slamming the door. The secretary whispered to me later that she thought the whole thing was ridiculous and that I'd done the right thing. While all this was happening, Clarissa had been researching similar cases across the country. She found 3 cases where students had used necessity defenses successfully after sharing medication during emergencies. In one case, a girl had shared her inhaler with a classmate having an asthma attack. In another, a boy had given his friend an EpiPen during an allergic reaction. The third case was almost exactly like mine, with anxiety medication during a panic attack. All 3 schools had ended up changing their policies instead of pursuing felony charges. Clarissa highlighted all the important parts and started building our argument around them. She said precedent was powerful in legal cases, and these examples showed that courts recognize the difference between drug dealing and medical emergencies. 3 days later at the school, I was cleaning out my locker when someone bumped into me, and a folded piece of paper fell to the floor. Picked it up. Elisa's handwriting. It said, "I didn't tell them to do this. I'm scared and they won't listen." My hand shook as I read it again. She was as trapped as I was. All the anger I'd been carrying toward her started shifting to the adults who were failing both of us. That same week, Douglas sent an email to all staff, saying he was bringing in a specialist, Neve Andrews, to train everyone on recognizing panic disorders and how to respond properly. Mom showed me the email since she'd gotten copied on everything related to my case. It felt like they were closing the barn door after the horse had already escaped, but at least it was something. The training happened on a Wednesday afternoon, and I heard about it from the school secretary who liked me. She said Neve had pulled Douglas aside during a break and told him that, based on what she'd heard about a certain student's symptoms, that student showed clear signs of panic disorder and needed professional evaluation immediately. The secretary said Douglas's face went white because a licensed clinician's professional opinion carried weight that nobody could ignore, especially with the lawsuit pending. 2 days later, Clarissa called to say Elisa's parents had finally agreed to have her psychologically assessed, though they kept insisting it was just to prove nothing was wrong with their daughter. Clarissa sounded excited and said this was a major breakthrough because once a professional evaluated Elisa, the truth would come out. The assessment was scheduled for the following Monday at a clinic downtown. While we waited for those results, Clarissa started working on a settlement proposal. Both sides would stop making public comments, nobody would admit any wrongdoing, and instead of the $300,000, there'd be a small donation to mental health training for the district. She said it wasn't perfect, but it was realistic and might get everyone out of this mess without destroying my family financially. That weekend, Ethan Baxter texted me a screenshot of something Kevin's girlfriend had posted on Twitter about people playing hero when they're really criminals. He said he was documenting everything as evidence of how the rumors had spread and damaged my reputation. Every screenshot and post helped build our case about the harm this whole situation had caused. Monday morning brought another problem. The diversion program orientation got scheduled for the same time as my shift at the grocery store, and Mom couldn't get off work to drive me there. We spent an hour on the phone trying to reschedule everything, and the stress was wearing on all of us. Dad started getting migraines from the pressure, and my little brother kept asking why everyone was always upset. Tuesday afternoon, Clarissa sat me down for final prep before the expulsion hearing. She reminded me that our goal was avoiding expulsion, not vindication. She said I had to swallow my pride and focus on damage control, which meant not arguing with the board or trying to defend what I did as the right thing. I had to act sorry even if I wasn't. Had to look remorseful even though I'd do it again. She made me practice my statement over and over until I could say it without my voice shaking or sounding angry. Meanwhile, Neve Andrews had written an expert letter about panic disorder emergency responses for the district that Clarissa got a copy of through Discovery. The letter didn't mention any specific students, but made it crystal clear that withholding aid during a panic attack could be fatal, that blue fingernails indicated oxygen deprivation, and that immediate intervention was necessary to prevent brain damage or death. It was powerful without violating anyone's privacy. Clarissa said it would help our necessity defense significantly. Wednesday morning, we got the news we'd been waiting for. Elisa's assessment results came back confirming panic disorder with severe episodes requiring immediate medical intervention. Her parents tried to resist the diagnosis, claiming the doctor was biased because they knew about the lawsuit. But they couldn't ignore the clinical evidence anymore. The psychiatrist had documented Elisa's symptoms going back years, including incidents her parents had dismissed as dramatics or attention-seeking. The report said Elisa had been suffering from untreated panic disorder since middle school, and that her academic decline was directly related to her worsening condition. Her parents had to face the fact that their daughter really was sick, that mental illness was real, and that she needed medication to function. They started her on a low dose of anxiety medication that same week, though they still acted like they were doing it under protest. Clarissa immediately added the assessment to our case file as proof that Elisa had been in genuine medical distress when I gave her the Xanax. The whole situation was finally starting to shift in our favor, but the damage to my life was already done, and nothing could undo the weeks of stress and fear my family had endured. 3 days later, Clarissa called with a mediation date and told me to clear my schedule for next Thursday morning. She came to our house that evening with a stack of papers and sat at our kitchen table, going through every possible outcome. She kept tapping her pen, explaining that mediation wasn't about winning or proving I was right. It was about finding middle ground where both sides could walk away without going to trial. She showed us similar cases, where families spent $50,000 on legal fees just to lose. Dad's face went pale. She made me practice saying sorry, without admitting I did anything wrong, which felt impossible. We went over it 20 times until I could say the words without my voice cracking or sounding angry. Meanwhile, Ethan from the school paper had been working on his follow-up article, and it came out that Wednesday in both the school paper and the local news website. He quoted 3 anonymous sources from inside the district office who said policies needed updating for medical emergencies. One source said the zero-tolerance rules were written in the 90s and never reviewed for situations where students might need to help each other survive. The article mentioned that other districts had already added emergency exceptions after similar incidents. It didn't name me or Elisa, but everyone knew what case he was talking about. The comments section exploded with parents arguing both sides. Some said rules are rules, and I knew the consequences. Others said they'd want someone to save their kid if they were dying. The article got shared over 2,000 times on Facebook. That same day, a group of 12 parents sent a formal letter to the school board that someone leaked to me. They were all parents of kids with anxiety, ADHD, or other conditions that needed medication. They wrote about how scared their kids were to even carry their own prescribed pills because of what happened to me. One mom said her son stopped taking his ADHD meds at school, and his grades tanked because he was terrified of getting expelled if someone saw the bottle. They demanded the board review the policy and add protections for medical emergencies. They also wanted mental health training for all staff so they could recognize panic attacks and other crises. The letter ended by asking if the board really wanted dead students just to maintain their tough stance on drugs. Thursday morning arrived. My expulsion hearing was set for 9 a.m. in the district office conference room. My parents and I sat on one side of the long table with Clarissa, while Principal Bernard sat on the other side with 2 assistant principals I'd never seen before. 5 school board members sat at the head of the table, looking tired and annoyed that they had to be there. The district lawyer started by playing the hallway security footage on a laptop screen. You could see me and Elisa going into the bathroom, then Elisa coming out 10 minutes later looking much calmer. The timestamp showed exactly how long we were in there. Principal Bernard pointed at the screen and said, "This is clear evidence of a substance transaction." Clarissa stood up and walked closer to the screen. She pointed out that there were no cameras in the bathroom so nobody could see what actually happened inside. She reminded everyone that Elisa's medical assessment confirmed she was having a life-threatening panic attack with oxygen deprivation. She pulled out printed screenshots of the medical report, highlighting the part about blue fingernails indicating potential organ damage. She looked directly at the board members. "Do you really want to punish a student for preventing possible brain damage or death?" One board member shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Then my English teacher walked in. I almost gasped. She'd said she wanted to stay anonymous. She looked right at me and gave a small nod before sitting down at the witness chair. She told the board I was one of her best students, always helping classmates and turning in work on time. She said she'd taught for 15 years and never seen a student punished for saving someone's life. She looked directly at Principal Bernard and said the policy was meant to stop drug dealers, not kids helping friends in medical crisis. Principal Bernard's face turned red, and he pulled out a printed copy of the student handbook. He started reading the zero-tolerance policy word for word, in this monotone robotic voice. He emphasized the part about no exceptions for any reason, and how the policy protected all students equally. He said if they made an exception for me, they'd have to make exceptions for everyone, and then the policy would be meaningless. He kept repeating that rules were rules, and intentions didn't matter. The contrast between my teacher talking about saving lives and him reading from a rulebook made him look heartless. A board member named Mrs. Chun raised her hand and asked, what would happen if the strict policy actually prevented students from helping in real emergencies? Would the district be liable if someone died because another student was too scared to help? Douglas from the district office stood up from the back row where I hadn't even noticed him sitting. He had a folder full of data about accommodation gaps and started presenting statistics about anxiety disorders in teenagers. He showed that 1 in 3 students dealt with anxiety, but only 10% had formal accommodations. He explained how the current policy created dangerous situations where students couldn't access help when they needed it most. The room got quiet when he finished talking. The board members whispered to each other for 5 minutes while we all sat there waiting. Finally, the board president cleared his throat and announced their decision. They wouldn't expel me, but I was suspended through the end of the semester, with the possibility to return next year under a conduct contract. I'd have to maintain perfect attendance and grades, submit to random searches, and complete a substance abuse program, even though I wasn't abusing anything. It wasn't fair, not even close, but it was better than expulsion and losing any chance at college. 2 weeks later, we had the mediation with Elisa's parents in a lawyer's office downtown. They put us in separate conference rooms so we wouldn't have to see each other. Clarissa went back and forth between rooms, carrying offers and demands. Elisa's parents wanted a full apology and admission that I drugged their daughter without consent. They also wanted the full $300,000. Clarissa told them we'd never admit to drugging anyone, since Elisa was having a medical emergency. She demanded they retract all public statements calling me a drug dealer, and acknowledge that Elisa has a legitimate medical condition. For 3 hours the lawyers went back and forth while my parents and I sat in that cold conference room, drinking terrible coffee. Mom kept checking her phone. She was missing work, losing hourly pay. Finally, Clarissa came back with what she called the best deal we'd get. We'd donate $5,000 to the district's mental health training fund, sign mutual non-disparagement agreements, meaning nobody could talk publicly about the case anymore, and there'd be no admission of liability from anyone. Elisa's parents wouldn't apologize for suing us, and we wouldn't apologize for helping their daughter. Everyone was unhappy with the deal, which Clarissa said meant it was probably fair. My parents had to borrow the $5,000 from my uncle, but at least we wouldn't lose the house. The next Monday, I met with Howard at the Juvenile Services office to finalize my diversion program requirements. He looked at my file and shook his head, saying, "This whole thing was ridiculous." He approved my community service at a local mental health nonprofit that ran a crisis hotline for teenagers. He said, "At least something good would come from this mess since you'd be actually helping kids in crisis, instead of just picking up trash on the highway like most diversion kids." 3 weeks into the program, I started getting updates through different people about what was happening with Elisa. My old lab partner texted that she'd seen Elisa at a therapist's office downtown, the same building where Neve worked. Her mom was sitting in the waiting room looking angry, but at least she was there. The therapist got Elisa's regular doctor to prescribe something for her anxiety, just a low dose to start. And even though her parents kept saying she didn't need it, they couldn't argue with the fact that she was actually going to school again and not having panic attacks every day. I heard from another friend that Elisa was doing her homework again, and had even raised her hand in class, something she hadn't done in months. Meanwhile, the school sent out this stupid email about reviewing their wellness policies and how they were scheduling mandatory staff training on student mental health, using all this corporate language that basically meant nothing. But at least they were pretending to care. My phone buzzed one night while I was doing my online homework, and it was Kevin. Just 2 lines. "I didn't mean for all this to happen. I'm sorry." I stared at it for 5 minutes trying to decide if I should respond, but I was too tired to care about his guilty conscience when he could have just kept his mouth shut in the first place. The next week, both our families had to go back to the lawyer's office to sign all the settlement papers. My parents in one room, Elisa's parents in another, signing page after page of agreements that nobody would talk about this online anymore, and the lawsuit was officially dismissed. My mom's hand was shaking when she signed because even though we only had to pay $5,000 instead of $300,000, it was still money we didn't have, and my uncle was never going to let us forget he helped. The legal part was finally over, but I still couldn't go back to regular school, and Elisa and I couldn't talk to each other because of all the legal stuff. I threw myself into finishing my diversion requirements, showing up early to every session at the crisis hotline, logging extra hours, completing all the worksheets and assignments they gave me. Howard called me into his office after 2 months and said I was doing great, that I'd finished everything ahead of schedule. Once the last paperwork went through, my record would be sealed like none of this ever happened, at least legally. He stamped a bunch of forms and told me to keep doing what I was doing because most kids in the program took twice as long to finish. A few days later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. When I opened it, it just said, "Elisa can breathe again. Thank you." I knew it was her using someone else's phone. And even though we agreed we should keep our distance while she was getting better, she said maybe someday, when all this was behind us, we could be friends again. I wanted to text back so many things, but I just sent a heart emoji and deleted the thread. The district finally announced their new protocols, sending out this long document about medical emergency procedures in bathrooms, and how staff would be trained to recognize mental health crises and respond appropriately instead of just calling it drug dealing. They were adding emergency buttons in all bathrooms and training certain teachers to be crisis responders who could make decisions about medical emergencies without waiting for an administrator. It wasn't perfect and it came too late for us, but at least kids like Elisa might get actual help now instead of getting expelled or having their friends arrested for trying to save them. I spent my last weeks of remote learning, grinding through assignments, finishing all my classes with decent grades, considering everything. I started working on my college applications with this long explanation about what happened. Howard helped me write it, explaining how I'd learned from the experience without admitting guilt, how I'd turned it into something positive by working at the crisis center. The crisis center became my main volunteer job even after my required hours were done because I actually felt like I was helping people, talking to kids who were going through panic attacks or depression or just needed someone to listen without judging them. Every shift, I thought about Elisa in that bathroom. How different things might have been if she'd had someone to call who understood what was happening to her. Now, I was that person for other kids. And even though my life got completely messed up for trying to help my friend, at least something good was coming from all the bad.